why don't you tell the story of how Breeze came to be and what made you think that the cities that Breeze flies to and from deserve to be connected, and why there was a business there?
Sounds good. So I'm going to date myself a little bit in that I tend to call Breeze the Star Trek airline, in that we boldly go where other airlines don't. So basically, that means we look at cities around the country that don't have non-stop service, or they're underserved. And so our goal isn't to run in and fight the majors for a slice of the pie. We'll create our own pie. And so the brilliant thing about the DOT is that they track everywhere people's flying. And so if you're flying from point A to point B and there's no nonstop, it knows you're going through another hub. And so at the end of the day, all that's compiled, and you can say, okay, well, this city, the top 3 cities that people from this city go to that doesn't have nonstop are up for grabs, and that's appealing to us. So we're 2 years old, just turned 2 last week. It's a David Neilman airline, the founder of JetBlue, and so that gives you an idea of sort of some of the DNA. But ultimately, it's a low-cost carrier on the ultra low-cost side, but we've created a new category called nice low-cost carrier, because any carrier can get you A to B. Some can do it at a low fare. It's hard to do it at a low fare and be nice. And so our goal is people to get off the plane and go, huh, because of course the other thing is when you're brand new and you want brand awareness, your guests, your passengers, we call guests, become your best ambassadors. And so we want people to get off the plane and go, huh, that was a nice plane, nice people, and they tell the experience.
And I assume that's why we've never heard of, as you hear so many stories about now, passengers wreaking havoc on a Breeze flight.
Touch wood, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
it does make a difference, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely, agreed.
Kristen, I know Breeze has a substantial presence in Providence. Can you talk about kind of the need that Breeze has filled? Like, what was not there that Breeze has brought to the table for your city?
Sure. Well, first of all, Breeze is going to establish a hub in Providence, and we think that's going to be about 265 jobs. So right there, it is a huge commitment to our community, and we're super grateful for that. But it also serves in a couple of ways. One is we are a big meeting and convention destination. We do more than $80 million direct spend revenue was brought in through our meetings and conventions team that I am proud to lead. So for us, this connectivity in that platform is very vital. We have to remain competitive. And the route that we're particularly excited about is Providence to Los Angeles, because we've actually never had a nonstop West Coast flight. So just that one thing made us extremely competitive. And then the third thing is, my colleague and friend Martha Sheridan was talking about the paradigm shift in how CVBs have to think differently, and you have different roles. And so I love that gray area between tourism and economic development. And that's where Breeze really fits in for us. With all of this remote working, we have an opportunity there. You don't have to live where you work. And that's something that Providence is really interested in. There was a survey on rent.com that came out this week, and Rhode Island's one of the top 5 places that people are looking at in terms of where to relocate. So having those routes and having sort of this fluidity within the country to be able to work in one place and live in another is going to be a huge economic development opportunity for us and other cities like us.
So, excuse me, Gareth, I know you all started back in basically concurrent with the beginning of the pandemic, and I want to talk about that and whether or not you guys had any idea that the trends, the demographic trends that Kristen's talking about were going to happen. But even before that, I'm curious, when you look at a map of the country, and I know we're going to talk about your relationship with Charleston and your relationship with Providence more. And Kristen, I think the Charleston-Providence flight is actually the most important. Los Angeles.
Well, I took it,
so
of course
city.
it is.
So, but Gareth, when you look at a map of the country and you look at places like Provo, Utah, and Hartford, and Norfolk, Virginia, and Charleston, and Islip, Long Island, what makes you think those cities have kind of anything in common that makes people want to travel between them?
Again, generally, we don't do primary to primary. And so that's not to say we don't do primary airports. We fly out of LAX and SFO, you name it. But it's LAX to Providence or Richmond or San Francisco to Norfolk, et cetera. You know, so it's connecting cities that don't have it currently. I'm a big geek on travel and how everything evolved. I mean, when you obviously back in the day, it was the train that put cities on the map, and then later it was the freeways. Airlines have basically taken on that role now as well as drivers of economic development, drivers of tourism, drivers of culture. But of course, they're not utilities, and so we work very closely with our partners, Helen, to make the most of that and to really drive the destinations as well. Breeze started before COVID. I mean, people thought, what an odd thing to launch an airline during a pandemic. Of course, it wasn't flying before then, but the plans were well underway. The office opened, I think, 6 weeks before it got shut down. You know, that sort of thing.
So it was just a stroke of good luck then.
It was just a stroke of luck. Having said that, it looks like brilliant strategy. I like the term backing into strategy, because during COVID, obviously everyone knows so many millions of people moved away from major metros to secondary and tertiary cities for better quality of life and all that, more space. At the same time, though, because of COVID, the major carriers took a lot of early retirements from pilots, and the economics of regional flying changed. And so since 2019, 123 cities in the US have lost 25% or more of their service. And so when you've got this contraction of service from smaller and rising cities, just as people are moving more to them, it creates such an opportunity for carriers like us to backfill that.
I just want to drill down on that a little bit. Can you say the statistic again?
So 123 cities have lost 25% or more of their service in the last 4 years.
And that's due to the pandemic.
It's a trickle-down effect of the pandemic, in that so many pilots took early retirement, and so when travel came back after the pandemic, the majors stole all the pilots and the regionals, and so suddenly regional carriers, the little guys, basically had to park a bunch of planes, and so the economics changed.
I have one more question for you, then I want to get back to Kristen, which is, you mentioned Charleston. Charleston was really your first base, as I understand it. Maybe now's the time to maybe put your slide on.
First destination, absolutely. So our very first flight was Tampa to Charleston. So first destination, indeed. At the time, it was one of 4 bases. From day one of 4 bases. We're now at 7. But Charleston is by far the most successful. It's our biggest base. We're at 20 non-stop destinations now, and 4, we call them breeze-throughs. So non-stops, obviously everyone knows what they are. People often call non-stops direct, but really direct is a no change of plane. We call those breeze-throughs. So there are 24 destinations out of Charleston. It's our biggest base, and certainly our most successful. So we so love Charleston that last week we decided to double our Charlestons and started flying from Charleston, South Carolina to Charleston, West Virginia. We'll see how that goes. But in truth,
you just couldn't resist that.
I couldn't exactly.
Yeah.
So, but in truth, I was saying, Kristen, basically, Providence will be our next Charleston. Where Charleston is now, Providence is about a year behind. We just became a base in Providence, as you say, a couple of months ago, and we're at 16 destinations nonstop, and it'll be 20-something in a year.
So I was going to ask you to put your Charleston slide up. I know you have a Charleston slide, but I feel like you've been dominating this conversation too much.
Brilliant,
so let's go back.
Can we put the route maps up?
All right, just go ahead and dominate some more.
In his defense, he's a charmer.
Good thinking.
Yeah, well, he's nice, right? He's nice. So,
Bree's nice.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
So basically, here are the 2 bases, Charleston and Providence. As you'll see, we go all across the country from both, and that's really just I have nothing to say about this slide other than that's where we fly.
You really make a moderator's job easy.
Pretty cool looking slide to me, so.
I actually have something to say about the slide, which is, so when you look at this, do you think, well, there are all these people in I don't know, Fort Myers who really want to fly to Charleston and they haven't been able to? Or do you say, like, they would want to if they could? I mean, is there a market that you knew about, or were you creating a market?
So the other thing the DOT shows is previous airline service. And so you can say, oh, in 1988, 20 people flew on this route. If it's not too arcane, I've got some numbers, and I know it's the afternoon. But let me just shock you with. Well, you had a question first coming.
I do.
Yeah, first, and then I'll bore everyone with the numbers.
Listen, I had like 3 coffees today. I'm totally fine with numbers. If you want to do numbers.
We recommend this for the audience as well. Actually, let's talk about Providence and how it's affected Providence. I'm curious, how would you have gotten from Charleston to Providence before Breeze?
Well, it would take not really. It would take 2 stops, and so that's always a challenge. And Helen actually talked about it earlier. We, like Charleston, we have major companies like Hasbro is headquartered in Rhode Island, as is CVS and a number of companies, and so that corporate travel became a challenge. And we have another challenge, which is because Rhode Island is so small, a lot of people can use very easily Logan Airport in Boston. And so that's about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour away from Providence. So we have much more competition. So when we have those nonstop flights like that, that helps to get that corporate business back into.
So since Martha Sheridan's not here right now.
Are we going to talk about Logan now?
No, I think we're going to talk about why TF Green is such a nice airport.
Okay.
And its virtues. So I'm teeing you up here.
I hear you. So Rhode Island TF Green International Airport is sort of, and it's the same thing with Charleston. When you get into these rising cities, as you call them, the ease of use is so much greater. I hear these horror stories about people having to wait in lines for, to get through security, and it's so much easier, and so that's something that we sell. You can probably use Logan, but you can do everything you need to do in such a short amount of time if you use Providence, and now having that extra cherry on the sundae saying, hey, and you can get there directly. And the other thing so these routes all look great, and Gareth knows this, but I also want to see them fly right, because Providence to the UK is actually shorter than Providence to California. We had a lovely relationship with Norwegian, and then they had some challenges with the 737. So that's something we're really interested in down the road. That's not a hint or anything.
Gareth, would you like to make an announcement now?
We are in the process of becoming a flag carrier. So there are 2 steps. First, you become a flag carrier so you can fly internationally. And secondly, you have some more credentialing for flying over water for a long time. We're in process on both of those, so watch this space.
So you mentioned that Charleston is important for you, and that Providence a year from now will be kind of also similarly important. Why these 2 cities? What about them made them just right for that?
Yeah, I mean, they're similar in both in that obviously great skilled workforce, good enough people that want to travel and have had higher prices beforehand. Terrific tourism support. Is everyone else's Instagram feed full of Providence? Charleston.
That's okay too.
I swear, obviously we're sitting here now, but don't you find that everyone's in Charleston and a lot more in Providence as well? I mean, both cities are having record systems. Charleston last year, I think 5.3 million went through the airport, which was their record. So, and TF Green is much the same. So, both I think are cities that have been having to pay higher prices, which is my segue into my arcane numbers.
You've got them. Let's hear them.
So
Absolutely.
basically, people say, well, how do you pick cities, and how do you decide things, and how do you grow the market? I mentioned the DOT stats on underserved markets, and so once you peg that, looking at the route between Charleston and Providence, in 2019, 40 people flew between the 2 daily. And so you think, well, 40, that's nothing, but of course there was no nonstop. And so 40 people were going through a hub or connecting every day back then. Cut to Q4 last year, that's up to 102. So 2.5 times that every day. 75% on Breeze. But then you look at the fares, and the fares in 2019 were $149 each way. Breeze average fare is $44 one way, so that's a 70% discount. Weirdly, well, I mean, sorry, it means still 30% are flying on other carriers, which are averaging a fare of $124. So it brought other carriers' fares down, but still 3 times the fare of Breeze. So just that's sort of how that's how we create markets. I mean, where markets didn't exist before, you bring the fares that low and get them there nonstop. Piece
But
of cake.
it's really a reciprocal relationship. So they get the product, but it's incumbent on us as destination marketing organizations to market that, because airlines are, airports are tied, their hands are tied in terms of the advertising that they can do. So we end up, I look at those and I see routes, but I also see opportunity. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, is looking at those routes and where does it make sense for us to grow our leisure market, and how do we work with like-minded destinations like Charleston, or I've had some conversations with Norfolk. So it's really, we have to support the work that they're doing, or it simply won't work.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that?
So we are, actually, we've been talking while we're here about some things we're going to do, Providence and Charleston together. We are looking at advertising both as a destination in Providence, but also with the state in terms of doing some elaborate marketing campaigns. We have some sporting events coming up. We're actually very close to Gillette Stadium, where the New England Patriots play. And so we'll be utilizing the fact that we have all these direct routes to work on things like we're doing the Army-Navy game this year, and FIFA World Cup soccer in 26, so things like that.
So I'm curious, if you, I don't know if you have any way of knowing this really, but if you, and this is for both of you, if you have, say, 100 people on a plane from any one of these cities landing in Providence, how many are business people? How many are leisure travelers? How many are family members going home? Who's looking at Breeze and saying, this is working, this works for me?
We don't particularly ask because while we're unusual in that pretty much you can only book through us. We don't book through OTAs, and so when you book through Breeze, you're on the app or on the website, and so we have a very good connection with our customers. You create an account to fly us, and so it means that if there's a delay or news, we can we can be in communication and keep that relationship going. If you book on Expedia and your flight's late, you probably won't hear because American doesn't know you've got them from Expedia. So that's super important. We are a leisure carrier, and so our schedule basically flies when demand is and grows from there. And so the nice thing is, Helen, to your point of access, of the couple of dozen destinations, half of those now into Charleston are daily, or at least 6 days a week, but virtually daily, and about half a dozen in Providence are coming along as well. So we'll keep adding service, but we don't really mind if you're corporate, family, or leisure. Most of our customers are family and visitors.
And a lot of times that line is blurred, especially in a place like Rhode Island, where the smallest state, you can get from the top to the bottom in about an hour. So we have a lot of people that might come for work-related and then travel to other parts of Rhode Island, or do a hub and spoke and see Boston and the Cape and other parts of Rhode Island. So it's kind of a gray area.
So last question, we've got about a minute and a half. And I'm just curious, Gareth and Kristen, if you all seeing this kind of network of cities, which is not really physically connected prior to this in any easy way, have a sort of growing kind of awareness of the economic import of these connections. If they're making more connections, if you're seeing sort of some traction happening with these cities recognizing that they do have a new relationship with each other and are acting upon it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I geek out on silly things that. Sorry, off topic for a second. Yeah. But if you look at flying from upstate New York to Florida, Buffalo people go to, I'm going to say Tampa, I'm not sure. People from Syracuse go to Fort Myers, and it's based on the old freeway system. for some reason, people still vacation where their grandparents used to vacation. It's very strange. But to that point, culture, social, business, corporate, everything comes from interaction and the networks this travel creates.
Kristen, last question, real quick. How's Breeze helping Providence? How's it elevating Providence?
Well, I think it helps to have the hub. I think that creates, it says to the world that we're a rising city and following in the path of bigger cities like Charleston. So, putting all of the other great stuff aside, even just that is a huge thing for us.
And that way, a rising city just has to drive to Boston as well. All right.
See, I told you that whole rising city thing was important. So.
I like it.
Thank you both so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.